Dragon Longevity is brought to you by MyGutly. MyGutly is the first company in the United States to offer personalized fecal transplantation. The concept powering MyGutly is that during a time of optimal health, the composition of the gut microbiome is collected via stool sample and is processed and stored in capsules. The capsules are readily available for future use to restore the gut microbiome of that individual to the state at which it was collected. MyGutly.com. Thank you for sponsoring. Welcome to Dragon Longevity. I'm your host, Kyle Cetrulo. I have a great guest today. I have Bernie Siegel. Now, Bernie has been an instrumental leader in the stem cell and regenerative medicine, as well as in the ethical approaches to regenerative medicine. And he's recently launched a new project, which I'm really excited to talk to him about, called the HealthSpan Action Coalition. Now, Bernie, you put on over 20 international stem cell conferences under the World Stem Cell Conference, and you've also been a leader in the Regenerative Medicine Foundation for as long as I've known you. I believe I met you at the 2008 World Stem Cell Summit when it was in Madison, Wisconsin, which was a great meeting. One of the meetings that really got me really interested in. I had a company at the time, but I saw the space was going to explode and be so exciting. But what was really interesting about that meeting, which I just want to kick this off, was that there are a lot of patients that used to go to the World Stem Cell Summit meetings, and we don't see the patients attending the stem cell meetings so much anymore. And why do you think it's taking so long for these therapies to reach the patients?
Well, the stem cells became, Kyle, a consumer movement. When at the dawn of time of stem cell research, and when I got involved 21 years ago as a patient advocate, and my background is law, as you know, I attended the first ISSCR meeting, the International Society for Stem Cell Research. And what I found at that meeting is that there were no patients there. And I was a cancer survivor myself when I was age 48 as a young man. And I realized that the voice of patients were missing. So what were the scientists going to do about that? Segments of the stem cell field and embryonic stem cell research were really, that was under siege by lawmakers and hijacked into the abortion debate in the United States, and confusion over what an embryonic stem cell was and the ethics behind it and the morality behind it. And as someone that was patient-oriented, and my life was saved by modern medicine and science, I became a champion of it, and the scientist, in effect, appointed me as the de facto lawyer for the field, and I was able to help work on policy issues. But the driving force, I realized, was were the patients and advocates. Patient advocacy represents public support for any position. And as Lincoln said, with public appreciation, you can do anything. Without it, nothing can get done. Having known how to promote things and been involved in different advocacy projects over my career as a lawyer, I realized this is something that needs to be a driving force, a link between the scientist and the patient world towards policy goals and achievable policy goals. So that became my mandate in creating a nonprofit organization that morphed into something called the Genetics Policy Institute, that created the World Stem Cell Summit, a conference that would not only bring in the top scientists from around the world, but the emerging industry, government, regulators, and patients to work together towards policy goals and fundraising goals to accomplish this. So the patients have always been the main connecting point with the organizations that I have led. Genetics Policy Institute changed to Regenerative Medicine Foundation, which was a better description of the umbrella that includes stem cell research and cell therapies and all the enabling technologies. So the summit last ran, as you were one of our guests and speakers, in Winston-Salem in partnership with the Wake Forest Institute for Regenerative Medicine. There were plenty of patient groups there represented. So that's the stem cell side of the story, but not the health span action side of the story.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about the HealthSpan Action story.
So over the course of running and conceptualizing um, 20 annual meetings, and we would always work with academic partners um, and co-organizers in different parts of the United States. We also did one in Shanghai, China. Um, we uh, I fell into conversations with those individuals interested in longevity. And the way I saw longevity is healthy lifespan or health span. One of them was Aubrey de Grey, who wrote the book Ending Aging. And I was invited to speak at a meeting that he organized in Cambridge many years ago. And I, in turn, regularly invited Aubrey to speak at the World Stem Cell Summit. And we brought in speakers from the Buck Institute and other aging research institutions on the science of longevity and aging. Well, of course, that has come full circle to represent a huge movement of interest in longevity. At the same time, the the technological and scientific advances converging right now, including AI, uh, are all hitting the shoreline like a giant tsunami. Uh, 20 years we've worked with stem cells, and now we're just getting it into use into medicine. Really, you prompted the first question was, why did it take as long as it has? Is because the complexities of getting uh, cell research as medicine to people is complex. Just goes through the same uh, pathway in the FDA, by and large, as a drug, a small molecule. And the science itself had to be progressed. But we have the technology now to really leapfrog cell therapies, which is one of the pillars of longevity and aging research. So, realizing all of this, in 2020, the World Health Organization declared that there was an ICD code for aging as a treatable medical condition. Now, that is an earthquake.
Yeah.
That, some of the social gerontologists were unhappy, but the biogerontologists were overjoyed, because what that represents is our pathways through regulatory systems and reimbursements to move the field forward. So understanding that the same patient movement that supported stem cell research and cell therapies and the policies to accelerate this that's one of the cornerstone pillars to longevity science, all right, as well as senolytics and other aspects in drug discovery. So it was all related. Longevity, the longevity movement, as it was generally understood, had different components to it. It had of course, the advocacy side, but the patient advocacy world is broken into uh, their own silos. So a diabetic patient advocate and a spinal cord injury might not realize how aligned they are on some of the technological and scientific breakthroughs related to cell therapies and stem cells or longevity. But when you question them, they all are concerned about not only the length of time that they age, but aging is the common denominator to the acceleration of all sorts of diseases and disabilities. That common denominator could be put into a movement. And we launched the HealthSpan Action Coalition, not only for the advocates for science and technology and biotechnology, pillar one, but the wellness, people who are so focused on wellness, business, we call them wellness obsessives. Well, they're not obsessives. We all take nutraceuticals usually. I want to lift my vitamin D level. And people who are exercise and biohackers, it's all relevant. They're all constituents for the science to move forward to solve these problems of health span. and increase a healthy lifespan. And finally, what Business Week called radicals, well, I wouldn't call them radicals, maybe longevists or people that want to have a long, happy life and make it as part of that movement as well. And you see the people that are funding it, some of our wealthiest people on the planet, Jeff Bezos and Altos Labs and others. So it's not enough. So here's the bottom line. The HealthSpan Action Coalition is a unifying coalition across all stakeholders. We've recruited 130 organizations so far to advance this field. At the cornerstone, it's distributive justice and access. So as a lawyer and someone who's worked in the United Nations to fight for the research to be, stem cell research to be preserved, and the loftiest way I put it is that health span should be a fundamental human right based on the preamble of the World Health Organization and other, the Declaration of Rights of Man. All of these things are relevant, and health span is aspirational. And Kyle, what's so interesting about that is that at this moment in time, this is absolutely the wave coming into shore with the advent, especially of artificial intelligence. So you have biotech plus AI, you have nanotechnology plus AI, you have genetics and genetic engineering plus AI, all of this together. And from the standpoint of policy, that's a strong suit. And all of these groups are united for a policy agenda to move this field forward.
Yeah, thanks for that overview. I love the differentiating factor between longevity and health span, because longevity has always been, let's live to be 200, 250 years old. Whereas with health span, you're saying, let's live as long as possible, but let's live a really healthy and active life rather than living long but suffering.
When you think about the economic aspects of growing older and I'll call it increasing decrepitude and the indignities of aging is a nicer way to put it, perhaps, a softer way to put it. But you look at the trillions of dollars that go to end of life care, and if we could avoid the onset of diabetes or the onset of other neurological disorders and not have that, we would live not only longer, but we'll live healthier and keep people. The economic benefits, I think, have been well established in many studies. It would change everything. But we're in a point now with technology and science revolution. Everything is going to change. I am actually not necessarily a techno-optimist, but a techno-realist. These things are going to happen, right? So how are we going to deal with it, and how are we going to get it to as many people as possible so it's actually accessible? And what are the challenges? And there are huge policy challenges and funding challenges to making this all happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I see the push coming from, the Silicon Valley. You mentioned Jeff Bezos and others that are really looking to extend their lives. They have pretty good lives going on. And, but they see the first challenges of Silicon Valley was to build the internet infrastructure. Okay, that's done. Then it was AI. That's not done yet, but they feel like they've done that. And the next real big push is the longevity component and the health span component coming from, a lot of these dollars and these entrepreneurs and forward thinkers. And that's really, I think, where I see a lot of this converging, right? It's really the next big challenge to, if you look at health span, we generally all fall off the cliff around 95 or 100. If you snake over 100, you did really well. But regardless of what we do technologically to enhance our bodies and live longer, we're still hitting that 100-year window. And that's where our species sort of maxes out at this point. So what are some of the technologies that you see coming down that could push that further out to live to 125, 150?
You know, there's an interesting project that I'm very supportive of. It's called um, the Robust Mouse Rejuvenation Project. It's being pushed by the LEVF Foundation, levf.org. And what it's taking are older mice, elderly mice, and treating them with an array of different suggested protocols using senolytics and others to determine, at least in this little mammal, what will work best to extend the lives. It's a very expensive project, but it's ongoing. And the preliminary results, I understand, are amazing. I'm not the scientist or the researcher to answer that question. You can talk to people like David Sinclair and Matt Kaberlein and others that I'm in league with that can brilliantly explain it. Suffice it to say that every part of the stem cell story has enabling technologies now. And I look at it as an issue of an array of technologies that are available that never existed at this high level before in in gene therapies and CRISPR, genetic engineering, and nanotechnology, imaging, and everything about a cell and what makes a cell work, and understanding the cell itself is the engine. It's overwhelming. And what was all about in 20 years ago, just we got to get embryonic stem cells and that's going to solve the problem. It's a different thing. Didn't understand the genomic stability of anything. We didn't understand. We thought we had tools that might make something accelerate in 5 years. Now we have the tools, and now we have the overarching tool of AI, artificial intelligence. So, how it plays out in my world, if I can share this with you, with the
Absolutely, yeah.
HealthSpan Action Coalition, is if you look at the 130 organizations that have joined the coalition in just less than a year, you'll see, of course, a number of prominent and less prominent patient advocacy organizations, whether it's focused on long COVID, spinal cord injury, diabetes, Parkinson's. These are some of them very reliable patient advocates. And you'll see some cutting edge longevity companies, biotech companies that fit into the space, funders that are in this space, advocates for certain science or regulatory measures, such as animal-free precision medicine and the Center for Contemporary Sciences. We have 3 prominent scientific journals that have joined, as well as podcasts, meritorious newsletters. It's a huge array of society to build a societal movement. And the reason we're doing it, and the reason I'm doing it, is there was a model for patient advocacy that you're very familiar with, Proposition 71 and Prop 14 in California. And that raised about $15 billion of California taxpayer money for the California Institute for Regenerative Medicine. And there's nothing like that institute in the world. It's incredible. And it was patient advocacy driven. I was fortunate to be on the board of the Prop 14 campaign that raised $5.5 billion in the election cycle of 2020. And the person that I organized the HealthSpan Action Coalition with is Melissa King. Melissa was the first executive director of CIRM, and was involved in the campaign, ran Americans for Cures Foundation, and also was the head of field operations for the Prop 14 campaign, patient advocate. Between our combined Rolodexes, if you'll excuse the last century term of network, we've made so many contacts amongst the patient advocacy world and the scientific world. We felt that this is a model for patient advocacy, right? This shows the diamond point of why an advocacy-driven organization at its core can influence policy, not only in the United States, but around the world. We were also joined as the initial founding director with Sabrina Cohen, a longtime well-known stem cell and spinal cord injury advocate. She was paralyzed when she was age 14. So that's the roots of the organization.
When do you have your next meeting? I wasn't able to see that for the HealthSpan. Are you going to have meetings?
I'm threatening to be semi-retired, Kyle, and putting on World Stem Cell Summits is a heavy lift. Now I'm operating as executive director, 2 C3 organizations, charitable organizations, the Regenerative Medicine Foundation, which works very hard on policy matters and analysis. Now I've expanded the portfolio to another C3, the HealthSpan Action Coalition. When the right opportunity comes and the right partners come in, there's always room for another World Stem Cell Summit. But, my own role, I can't guarantee, is that it's more work than you understand the amount of work, having run the Perinatal Stem Cell Society and putting on meetings. We'll try putting on a global conclave as a small organization. We weren't a big conference company. So, and I'm getting tired of traveling around, and I certainly don't want to sign any contracts for hotels anymore. So,
You're speaking to the choir
there. That's a way of begging
sure.
off answering your question.
Well, I just want to make sure I didn't miss it because I want to go to it.
You won't be. You'll be the first one I'm going to invite.
Yeah, thank you. Well, it really gives a lot of credit for you and Melissa to pull the 130 organizations together so quickly, and it also talks to the urgency around bringing this to people why we're still alive. Not 100 years from now, but in the next 5 to 10 years, possibly.
Yes. There's no time to waste. And I've always viewed as a patient advocate and policy advocate that this is like an ambulance. By these advocacy efforts, we're going to improve and save lives and bring cures and treatments, effective treatments, really fast. And that will help people who are living now. And these things are starting to come in. But with every good thing that's a breakthrough in the lab or even gets an FDA approval, it still has to be paid for, right? And we work in a world of nation states. So that means myriad of regulatory systems that have to keep up with innovation, which is one of the things we're trying to achieve. And at the same time, distributive justice and workforce development. So we'll have our biotech workers to be able to do this and have them equipped with AI. It sounds like we're boiling the ocean, but I like to think we're boiling one bucket of the ocean at a time, or at times to get this done. And the Perinatal Stem Cell Society is joined as part of the coalition. Other medical and societies and scientific societies are joining as well. So the Cord Blood Association and others. So in a league of goodwill, people with goodwill, we feel we can get this done sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I think it comes back to the patient advocacy, and I see myself as a patient advocacy proponent as well, following in your footsteps, because that's what the end game is. When we did a change.org survey for the 2020 Cures Act, I think I got like 50,000 people to sign up and over 700 pages of comments. And it was essentially the same comment: we can't wait any longer, for this medicine to come through. And do you see the U.S. I know a lot of the money is coming from Silicon Valley and a lot of the really hardcore cutting edge, but a lot of therapies are going to offshore clinics and Japan and international places. Do you see the transition where maybe the US is losing a little bit of edge in the longevity health span
I
markets
think
because of the
that's a
regulatory?
really good question. The FDA is changing and is putting a lot more effort in the cell therapy space, in the biologic space, and my concern is it's not keeping up with the innovation and is overwhelmed. It is an overwhelmed organization that does not institution that doesn't have enough resources, and I think and I think uh, it's up to our leadership to make sure it is funded, because or else things that should happen through technology in in a short time, 2 5 years, it's going to continue to take 10 or 20 years and billions of dollars. It's not tenable. That's why you see things going offshore, and that's why clinical trials in places like Japan are more friendly, or uh, 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 smaller situations, smaller countries are able to advance something much quicker. And it just, I hate to say it is what it is, because the 20th Century Cures Act and the RMAT provisos that you worked on as an advocate, and so did I, to get that through. It's great, but where are the therapies? And and what level of safety has to be shown to get this through? And at times you feel like bureaucracies are heartless. It's really not a pleasant narrative to think about. But nevertheless, we got a system, and I think the United States is on track to get things done, but needs more resources in the regulatory space.
Yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly. And I'm not sure if you saw that letter by Senator Barr talking about that as well. I mean, I believe there's 2,500 trials going on, and FDA approved five or so of those in the last year or so. That's just not
It's
good enough.
it's disheartening. I realize, and we're going to see MSCs move forward. Um, at the time of this recording, of course, we just learned of Arnold Kaplan passed away,
Oh, I
and
didn't know that.
yeah, this was recent. This was just a day ago, I understood. So at the time of this recording, so he was the pioneer, the father of MSCs, and it's one of the sad things is he did not live long enough in his long and amazing life that he wasn't able to see this regularly applied in an approved fashion. It was one of his last talks that he gave was, doctors, hear me now. You are going to be using MSCs in your practice. And, and I believe that. That's just one type of cell therapy uh, that's going to come through and change medicine forever.
Have you had a stem cell transplant?
I have not. Have you?
Yeah, I've treated myself like over 25 times. I mean, I
Holy
through my own
cow, I didn't
product.
know that. That makes you, you're going to end up, we're going to have to take you apart and figure out if it worked.
Yeah, I mean, I look at it from a health span perspective as maintenance. Like why wait till it breaks down? Is how I approach the stem cells, and
Well, you're one of those brave pioneers that, if it's good for someone else, let's see if it works on you. You seem to be thriving to me. That's good.
well, was fortunate enough to have access to the stem cells, and I found a doctor who would give them to me, and that's how I was able to do it in the U.S. But that's not normal for everybody. And I also use Dr. Kaplan's his story of Osiris Therapeutics. He was the founder of Osiris Therapeutics, and he created a drug, an MSC drug called Prochymal, which is
Right.
still not approved in the U.S. I mean, he started Osiris Therapeutics in 1996. It's been approved in Canada, New Zealand. In fact, the owner of that drug is this company called Mesoblast, and their entire revenue comes from the royalties from their Japanese licensee. And it's
Well,
just,
I've known Mesoblast and its founder for a very long time. And when I think of the suffering in graft versus host disease,
mm,
and to think that there is on the shelf something that could alleviate that, and for it could, the regulatory system, they could never fit. It could just never get through the FDA. And the suffering is so severe, uh, and when you see children dying of that, uh, you know, it, you know, it's infuriating. It's frustrating to a layperson. And remember, I'm not a scientist. I hang with them, but I'm not. Just your heart goes out to people. So this is the revolution that we're in, because if a longevity medicine comes into existence, and it's only going to be good for some people in Silicon Valley. It's not going to go for a farmer in Iowa. It's not going to go for a farmer in Malawi, right? What are we going to, what's going to happen? Is this even going to get through or be allowed to get through? And what kind of society we have? And I believe in the free market, and I believe that um, uh, that's a tremendous way to move this forward. But there are a myriad of and nation states and cultures to navigate to when you have a scientific revolution. And we have arguably this future shock or species altering events happening with these technologies. So we have to create the societal boundaries that are necessary, those boundaries to allow this to go forward. That's a pretty challenging task. But we also want it to make sure the boundaries are set so this can get to as many people as possible. So that's the challenge, and that's why we need to have coalitions uh, to work on it, and people who know how to utilize coalitions. So you work with hierarchies, right? You can work with the top, the middle, and the bottom, but you also work across hierarchies. All right. This is the power of a coalition to actually get things done. So that's sort of our model of moving this field forward.
I have one final question that's a little bit off topic, but you really played an instrumental role in limiting cloning. And that was back in 2002, where you filed the first lawsuit uh, to address that. Where do we stand on cloning now?
Uh, my personal view is reproductive cloning would be an unethical practice. Um, it's not safe. I think it is. One could argue that it's akin to incest. It's something that is society is not ready for, and a clone coming into the world would face a host of problems. So I'm certainly not in favor of reproductive cloning, just as I wasn't in favor of what the Chinese doctor did to create CRISPR, the CRISPR babies that are in existence, who represented the CRISPR babies. So when I brought the case against Clonaid, and it's a bygone era, 21 years ago, right? It was really aimed at preserving cloning of stem cells, which was we don't think about that now because we have iPSCs and cell reprogramming, which has nothing to do with an embryo, right?
Yeah.
Or destruction of an embryo. But when I was looking at the opponents of human cloning, of reproductive cloning, they were really also trying to ban the whole aspect of that embryonic stem cell research, that branch of it. And I feel that is still meritorious, and embryonic stem cell research must proceed. And because it was so successful, we have cell reprogramming and iPSCs. And many critics said of that the cells are going to be too genomically unstable to work or ever be used in therapy. Certainly, they're great tools for drug discovery and such, but I think that field is going to explode, and we'll have iPSCs. But that too has ethical conundrums attached to it. So, understanding that, where do we draw the line? That's why, again, to have a cross section of society working on this, so at least they'll be educated in it and not stampeded to laws that where patients and doctors will be put in jail or researchers will be put in jail. That I'm just a strong believer in freedom of scientific research, and will always be that.
Yeah, it's interesting to wrap this up is that was the message from Jamie Thompson at the World Stem Cell Summit in 2008.
You have a great memory, Kyle.
And it's still the message today, 21 years, maybe not 21
thank
years.
You for all the pioneering work that you continue to do. And you're the master of perinatal stem cells and now moving into different territories that are fantastic. So you're a key player in this field. And all of us that have labored it as long as we have great gratitude to you for your work. And this podcast is a great communication tool. And we all wish you every success.
Well, thank you for the kind words. And I feel the same way about you and so many other leaders in this space too. And it really boils down to the patients. And that's where I put my heart and energy is that these therapies, I mean, I'm fortunate enough to have access to stem cells. Why am I the only one? Or people who can pay $50,000 to go to Colombia. It needs to be for the farmer in Idaho as well. So that's where I put my heart.
Right.
Iowa, wherever the farmer lives.
Currently in Iowa, we're worried about, but that's okay. Everywhere.
Right. Well, thanks so much, Bernie. It's great to talk to you and share. And thank you for sharing your wisdom with us.
Thank you.